up, guys? It's Scott here from Woke Societies, and I know it's been a little while since I made my last video, but we are up and running, people. The last 2 weeks of my personal life have been absolutely crazy. I myself was sick, my son was sick, my truck broke down, needed thousands of dollars worth of repairs. Just life happened, guys, and just lost track of everything. But I was lurking on Twitter, keeping up with the news feed, all the news stories and all that stuff. Not too much crazy stuff going down that is like breaking, but certainly some stories that I wanted to talk about today. But with the week off that I took off from making videos, it gave me some clarity, gave me some new ideas of where I want to take this show. I know I do a lot of the news stories and stuff like that, which I'm going to continue to do, but I don't want that to be the entire week of content. So what I'm going to start doing is doing the news stories as I have been doing, and a lot of you appreciate that, and I know you like that content. But in the same week, I'm going to try to do a deep dig on a particular story, and that is what we're going to be doing today, and really dive into how things are connected and stick to one topic instead of multiple stories that are breaking on the news and all that good stuff. So we're gonna try that, see how it goes. The subscribers have still been coming in, which has been fantastic. We're at 360. If I hit 400 by the end of the month, I'll be happy, because I kind of did miss that week there in between. But we'll see what happens. I'm very optimistic. Things are moving right along, and followers are still coming, and the subscribers are still coming in, which is fantastic. So what we're gonna be talking about today is some crazy shit, guys. I'm gonna be talking about it's going to be Epstein, because the Epstein story should not be going away, should not be dying. All the connected parties, institutions, professors, we're going to see here, none of these connections are really being talked about in the mainstream media too much, and how important they really are. So I'm going to be sticking to the story of the MIT Media Lab being connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and also we're going to be talking about how Bill Gates is affiliated with all this, and we're going to be basically working off two timelines, guys. I'm going to go back and show you how far the Maxwells and Epstein have a connection, and how it played out to how China was able to start their rocket programs before, in the beginnings of it, the whole beginning of it, how the Maxwells had everything to do with the Chinese starting the rocket program. And at the same time, we're going to be talking about how Epstein was able to fund the CRISPR program, also now headed by the Chinese. It's all crazy stuff, all the weird scientific shit that Epstein wanted to get into that's kind of been swept under the rug. We're going to be getting into that today, and it's going to be really interesting. And I'm going to show you guys how he funded all of it. And I've been working on this probably for about a week now, digging into this and seeing what the connections are. So bear with me. We're going to get through it all, and I'm going to blow your mind. So we're going to start out with the news stories that broke. MIT Media Lab director resigns after criticism over financial ties to Epstein. We're just going to call him Ito. Ito, the director of Massachusetts Institute of Technology's prestigious Media Lab, resigned on Saturday in the wake of revelations about his acceptance of contributions from Jeffrey Epstein, the multimillionaire financier for sex trafficking. Ito's resignation came one day after the New Yorker detailed his financial ties to Epstein. Last night, the New Yorker published an article that contains deeply disturbing allegations about the engagement between individuals at the Media Lab and Jeffrey Epstein. MIT President L. Raphael Reif wrote in a letter to the university's community. He called the allegations extremely serious, saying that they demand an immediate, thorough, and independent investigation. This morning, I asked MIT's general counsel to engage a prominent law firm to design and conduct this process. I expect the firm to conduct this review as swiftly as possible, and to report back to me and to the executive committee of the MIT Corporation, MIT's governing board. Reif continued. He said that he received Ito's resignation on Saturday afternoon. Reif called the acceptance of gifts from Epstein a mistake of judgment, and said the university is actively assessing how best to improve our policies, processes, and procedures in order to prevent such mistakes in the future. And sorry guys, I'm still getting over allergies, cold, whatever you want to call it. New York has gotten very cold very fast in the last week. So I'm getting over this, so bear with me. Anand Haradas, I'm not saying that one again, an MSNBC contributor and former New Yorker Times columnist, resigned as a juror for MIT's Disobedience Award after the Times and other news outlets reported that Ito had taken $525,000 from Epstein for the lab and another $1.2 million for his private investment funds. So this guy Ito, big wig over at MIT Media Lab, and he was getting donations from Epstein, and obviously people were wondering, why were you taking donations from a convicted child pedophile? So he has since resigned. That's part one of the story. And here we are at this article. Let me get rid of this crap here. University Research Center concealed its relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now we're talking directly about MIT. The MIT Media Lab, which has been embroiled in a scandal over accepting donations from the financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, had a deeper fund raising relationship with Epstein than it was previously knowledge, and they even attempted to conceal the extent of its contacts with him. So MIT is trying to hide what they were taking for Epstein. Now, why would they do that? Dozens of pages of emails and other documents obtained by the New Yorker reveal that although Epstein was listed as a disqualified in MIT's official donor database, the Media Lab continued to accept gifts from him, consulted him about the use of the funds, and by marking his contributions as anonymous, avoiding disclosing their full extent, both publicly and within the university. Perhaps most notably, Epstein appeared to serve as an intermediary between the lab and other wealthy donors, soliciting millions of dollars in donations from individuals and organizations, including the technologist and philanthropist Bill Gates and the investor Leon Black. According to their records obtained by the New Yorker and accounts from current and former faculty and staff of the Media Lab, Epstein was credited with securing at least $7.5 million in donations for the lab, including $2 million from Gates and $5.5 million from Black. Gifts the email describes as directed by Epstein or made at his behest. The effort to conceal the lab's contact with Epstein was so widely known that some staff in the office of the lab's director, Ito, who we just talked about, referred to Epstein as Voldemort, or he who must not be named. So we just had a quote from Ito back there, the one that just resigned, saying that it was a lapse in judgment. But yet we have on record here from his own staff saying that he knew exactly who Epstein was, and he referred to him as Voldemort, who is the evil guy in the Harry Potter series, he who must not be named. So do you think he knew what he was getting involved with Epstein? It's a rhetorical question. He absolutely did. No, we're not stupid. The documents and sources suggest that there was more to the story. They show that the lab was aware of Epstein's history. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges. Remember, he took the lesser charge for solicitation to an underage prostitute, and of course that disqualified him as a donor, right? But yet they continue to take his money. Here's emails talking about it. There's actually one that's labeled Jeff Epstein money, and it looks really bad on MIT, right? So let's get into the last article here, and then we're going to get into the crazy history behind all this. Gates' former... Oh, wait. That's even crazier. Bill Gates made donations to MIT. Excuse me, guys. Through Jeffrey Epstein. Here are all the tech mogul's connections to the financier. Emails from MIT Media Lab directors say Epstein directed Bill Gates to donate at least $2 million to the research lab. One way Epstein wielded his fine influence was through philanthropy. Institutions including MIT and Harvard have both publicly confirmed that Epstein donated large sums of money to various programs at the universities. MIT was not as forthcoming publicly, the New Yorker, which we just talked about. The lab's director, Ito, along with its former director of development and strategy, Peter Cohen, and other Media Lab staffers sustained efforts for a number of years to receive anonymous donations from Epstein and gave him the ability to influence how they were spent, the New Yorker reported. Epstein also helped MIT Media Lab receive funding through donations from his other powerful, wealthy associates, including Gates and the investor Leon Black. The aforementioned emails sent by Ito in October 2014 said this is a $2 million gift from Bill Gates directed by Jeffrey Epstein. Cohen replied with, for gift recording purposes, we will not be mentioning Jeffrey's name as the impetus for the gift. So guys, this was just they're describing a way that Epstein was using using the go around to reporting these of who was gifting this money, and Bill Gates was part of that, as that kind of a reach around donation that could not be tracked back to them. The denial from the Gates Foundation spokesperson, of course they're going to deny it, contradicts the contents of the emails, but the New Yorker also published an email from Epstein to Ito where the financier wrote, Gates, as in Bill Gates, would like a write-up on our One Science program for Tuesday next week. Ito asked Epstein to specify what type of write-up, and Epstein replied, more specific so that he can fund. So they were pitching an idea to Bill Gates. He wanted a write-up of the science program they were working on to get him to throw money to invest into it. The lab ultimately secured, after that, $7.5 million from Gates and Black, the founder of one of the largest private equity firms, seemingly using Epstein as the primary go-between contact. MIT Media Lab didn't immediately respond to Business Insider's request for comment. Very sketchy stuff. So it begs the question, right? Why is Bill Gates involved? Why is Epstein so heavily involved with donating money to MIT Medical Lab? What are they doing? And just a little tidbit on the side here. 2 days before his death, now this is what Bill Gates wants to say, he has no involvement. There's really no involvement with Epstein. It's very casual, business casual. We had some run-ins at dinners, parties, whatever, right? And Bill Gates was also on Epstein's plane, which is also logged. So 2 days before Epstein's death, Epstein signed a last will and testament that named one of Gates' closest connections as alternate executor of his estate if his longtime lawyers were not able to carry out their duties. This is someone super close to Gates. Guys, Bloomberg reported that Boris Nikolic, an immunologist and biotech entrepreneur who formerly served as Gates' chief scientific advisor until 2014, was shocked to see his name. He was named alternate executor by Epstein, so the one that would be taking over his estate. I was not consulted in these matters, and I have no intent to fulfill these duties whatsoever. Again, another example of anyone that was involved with Epstein prior to his arrest. They're trying to keep away. Back away. I have nothing to do with this guy. Of course they're going to say this. His spokesperson also says Epstein never invested in Nikolic's funds or had any business dealings with him. Well, if that's the case, why would Epstein name a person their executor if he didn't trust his lawyers to do what they said and named him as second in command of his estate? These questions beg answers, guys. And the fact that this person's very close to Bill Gates, who we now know Bill Gates was investing money through Epstein to MIT. What were they doing? Why would he name? And he's the guy saying he was surprised that Epstein named him as an alternate executor. Super sketchy, right, guys? I mean, what is going on? So, as far as the Bill Gates part in this, I have seen quotes from him stating that as far as world population, that the world would be better off if there was less people on it, right? Or we could make a super race of better, bigger thinking human beings, right? Those quotes are out there. I don't have them to show as proof, but you guys can find them. It's out there, trust me. Actually, don't trust me. Do your own research and find it yourselves. Think for yourselves. I'm just letting you know what I know. As far as the Bill Gates part, that's kind of closing on this episode, but it's going to lead directly into the rest of this episode, which I want to get into, which still ties Epstein, the Maxwells, and the, what's it called here? I forgot the name. The CRISPR program. So, let's jump into this. This is crazy. So the question is, guys, right? What was Epstein doing with that money that he was funding MIT labs, right? What were they doing? So before we're going to get into all that, we have to look back at some history here. At how the Maxwells and these guys named the Molinas are connected to all of this. So this is part one. We're going to do the second part as soon as I finish up this timeline, and we're going to tie it all together in the end. So this is what we have here. We have Robert Maxwell, who is the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who we know was Epstein's girlfriend, handler, procurer, whatever you want to call her. She's highly involved with what was going on with Epstein, the girls, all the sick shit that we know was happening. He also had two daughters here, Isabel Maxwell and Christine Maxwell. So the tie-in here, where I wanted to focus on, is this guy named Frank Joseph Molina. He married Marjorie Duckworth, who gave birth. They had a son, Roger Molina, and the son of Roger Molina and Christine Maxwell, obviously, they married. And Christine Maxwell's father-in-law is this guy, Frank Molina. And this guy, Frank Molina, was part of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and let's just get into a little history of him real quick. The Molina family can be traced back nearly 400 years. They mostly lived in northern Moravia in Austria-Hungary monarchy, later Czechoslovakia, but some moved to the European countries into the South and North America. Frank J. Molina was the most distinguished family member and lived in the U.S. Scientific research activities that he was part of was he was the founder of the American Rocket Research. That's the most important thing I want you to remember about him, guys. He was a scientist, experimenter, designer, manager, and also a humanist. And guys, his prime work was done in the 20s, 30s, and the 40s. Now, what's so important about him? So these guys were the pioneers of rocketry, starting ballistic missiles, things for NASA, a bunch of things. So we have the main guys that started Aerojet. We have Foreman, Haley Theodore von Karman, Joseph Molina, which is we just talked about here, Jack Parsons, and Martin Summerfield. Now these guys, again, were the pioneers in rocketry, and they all worked together for years. They were all good buddies. So let's just look at Jack Parsons here. Who is Jack Parsons? This sex-crazed cultist was the father of modern rocketry. On June 17, 1952, a boom rocked Pasadena, California, explosion at Coach House on Old Christake Estate, a plot of land on Millionaire's Row where a large manor once stood. The interior of the house was torn apart by a science experiment gone wrong, and the debris were strewn about pages. And it just goes into more detail, guys, about how he, again, was the pioneer of modern rocketry, but this man, on his personal life, was also a sex-crazed cultist. Also involved with Molina here, who was also involved with the Maxwells. So we have a sex-crazed cultist through Frank Joseph Molina, and this guy, Jack Parsons. There's one connection. So this is just a picture of here Frank Joseph Molina and Theodore von Karman during his work on JATO in 1941. Now, during these times, guys, communism was a huge, huge scare for Americans. The United States at this point is in the midst of World War II, and they are not only fighting that, they are trying to get rid of communism in the United States. But there's also stories about that and how that was also not happening. They were allowing communist infiltration to come in. So we have all these guys working on rockets, right? And we have this guy. We're going to show you a picture in just a second. This guy is Cheyenne. So obviously these were all secretive programs building rockets and, try to keep secrets from the communists from stealing their ideas, right? The need for secrecy and the potential threat of communism created a problem for von Karman and his team because many in his orbit were already communist, having joined the party in the 1930s. These included Molina and his friend, Chinese rocketeer Cheyenne, we're just going to call him. Cheyenne and Molina had joined up in 1938 because they thought that the Communist Party was the most effective vehicle for tackling the rise of fascism abroad and systematic racism at home. They hated that the local Pasadena swimming pool ran one blacks-only session on Wednesday morning, only for the pool to be drained and cleaned for whites to return on Thursday morning. So guys, right here, we're going to go back to Molina. He's friends with this guy right here. This is Cheyenne, who was not a communist at the time. Not a communist. He is great friends with Molina, who we now know is related, who is Christine Maxwell's father-in-law. So we have a Maxwell connection, and now we find out we're friends. This guy Molina was friends with Cheyenne. And they all worked in these rocket programs together. They were close friends. This guy's Cheyenne again. Now, again, at this point, we have what's called the Red Scare. And this is when the Americans were literally deporting people who they thought were communists or a threat to the country and just getting rid of them completely. And unfortunately, this guy, Xian, was part of that deportation. And this guy was also a genius. He learned from Melina here about rockets. And let's look at what happened here. Let's just read this. Xian was a prominent Chinese aerodynamicist and a cyberneticist who contributed to rocket science and established engineering cybernetics. Recruited from MIT, he joined Theodore von Karman's group at Caltech's Graduate Aeronautical Laboratories, including the founding team of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Later, he turned to China and made important contributions to China's missile and space program, which we'll get into in just a second. Shortly after arriving at Caltech in 1936, Qian became fascinated with rocketry ideas of Frank Melina, other students of von Karman, and their associates, including Jack Parsons. Along with his fellow students, he was involved in rocket-related experiments at Galset, where he received his PhD. In 1943, Qian and two other members of the rocketry group drafted the first document to use the name Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Shortly after marrying in Shanghai in 1947, Qian returned to America to take up teaching position at MIT and was granted a permanent resident permit. He answered no on an immigration questionnaire that answered if he had ever been a member of an organization that advocated to overthrow the U.S. government by force. This, along with the American Communist Party document from 1938 with Qian's name on it, was used to argue that Qian was a national security threat during the era of the Second Red Scare. Despite that fact, in 1949, at the recommendation of von Karman, Qian became the Robert H. Goddard Professor of Jet Propulsion at Galset. He applied for naturalization at the time but could not obtain citizenship. Von Karman wrote of Qian at the age of 36, he was an undisputed genius whose work was providing an enormous impetus to advances in high-speed aerodynamics and jet propulsion. He worked on designing an intercontinental spaceplane, which would later inspire the X-20 Dinosaur, a precursor to the American space shuttle. So guys, before this Qian guy, or Xian, whatever you want to call him, he was the godfather in China as far as rocketry. And where did he come from? He came from America. All the ideas were originally learned from Frank Musina here, and because America thought he was a threat to the country, they deported him to China, right? So this would piss anybody off, right? They've been in America for years. You're known for your work at MIT. You worked for MIT. You were a professor at MIT. And what is the country that you live and work for? What do? They send you off to China because they believe you're a communist and you're a threat to national security. So guess what? You want to send me off to another country? Let's take what I've learned and I'm going to give it to your adversaries. We're going to give your stuff, all your ideas to China, which I am very well aware of. And I can even build myself and start from scratch, right? And this is exactly what Xian did. So Xian went there and built their rocket program from scratch. And because of America's stupidity, they gave China exactly what they needed to create their own rocket program. Crazy, right? And this all ties back to Maxwell, to the Maxwells here, and the Molinas. And we find out that this guy Xian was a friend of Melina. He comes on board. They have a team of these very smart rocket guys, and this is what happens, right? So that's part one. Let's get into part two. So we're going to get into what Epstein has. What does Epstein have to do with all this, right? So Epstein creates his foundation called the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation. And what is this foundation all about? Advancing science in the fields of theoretical biology, neuroscience, physics, genetics, and artificial intelligence. Now, I don't know if I made a video on this stuff on this one particular part, guys. There was emails and documents found that Epstein wanted to make his own race of people. So he was saving his semen and using genetics and a bunch of other things that he was funding to essentially make his own race, to have a superior race, right? So let's see. This is the Harvard University, And this is also opening up too, guys, because it's not just MIT. Harvard has a huge part to play in this, and that is still developing. New York, the program of evolutionary dynamics at Harvard University announced that to the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation, its main sponsor, that its staff were closer to understanding the link between chemical kinetics and when life takes over. So you have that. You have another one here. Jeffrey Epstein holds a conference of Nobel laureates to define gravity. 21 renowned physicists, including 3 Nobel laureates, recently met in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands for defining gravity. The conference was financed by science philanthropist Jeffrey Epstein and his foundations. Epstein 6 Incorporated was organized by Lawrence Krauss, professor of physics at Arizona, and the list goes on and on. And not only that, let's see. Oh, that sucks. It won't let me continue here. But the main one I want you to see here, guys, is that Epstein was funding, through his own foundation, studies into what life is, where does it actually begin, and the necessities of life, right? So he starts that foundation, and he gets on this thing called the Broad. And I had to look up what the Broad was, and this is what it is. Broad Institute of MIT. It's part of MIT. And Harvard was launched in 2004 to improve human health by using genomics to advance our understanding of the biology and treatment of human disease and to help lay the groundwork for a new generation of therapies. These were the guys that broke the human genome. They mapped the human genome. Huge stuff. It was a huge breakthrough. And after all this, that was in 2004, Epstein was funding these guys. And let's take a look. So you have MIT, through Epstein, the Broad Institute, as the Broad Institute co-founder, Eric Slander, and we're going to get into this just a moment, Feng Zhang of CRISPR. And MIT Media Lab connection, also funded through Epstein, Nicholas Negroponte, founder, and Ito, who we've been talking about, was the director who just resigned. And the crazy thing is, guys, I want to bring China into all this. How did China get involved with all this? As far as genomes, studying life, could possibly do science research to create a superhuman species. Because that was what Epstein was all about. That's what he was getting into. He wanted to live forever. So how did we end up in China? Well, we went on the Broad Institute's website. It says right here, Shang Lab and Adgene, 5 years of sharing CRISPR for research worldwide. And you see China, right in here, is green. They have research. And 52,093 plasmids and regions requested, shipped to 62 countries, shared with 2,339 institutions. So, you have that. Now, what's up with this Feng Zhang guy? Where is he here? This is him right here. He is all part of CRISPR. And CRISPR, guys, if you don't know what CRISPR is the program that's currently going on where you can select traits of whatever you want in human beings and you can effectively create them in a lab. You can create a super high intelligent human being. So, what is all this leading to? You have Zhang here. Feng Zhang is a core institute member of the Broad Institute of MIT, another MIT member, and Harvard, as well as an investigator at the McGovern Institute for Brain Research at MIT, the James and Patricia Poitras Professor of Neuroscience at MIT, and associate professor at MIT with joint appointments in the departments of Brain and Cognitive Sciences and Biological Engineering. Zhang is also an investigator at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. He's also a molecular biologist developing and applying novel molecular technologies for studying the brain. Zhang pioneered the development of genome editing tools for use in eukaryotic cells, including human cells from natural microbial CRISPR-Cas9 systems. He and his team have adapted multiple other CRISPR systems for use as a genome engineering tools, including most recently the RNA-targeting CRISPR-Cas13 systems. So guys, this is pretty much the brainchild behind CRISPR, but you have Epstein funding all this. He is funneling money into all this, and also because it's MIT, you have Bill Gates' money going into this as well. Is this all starting to come together for you guys? So at the end of all this, what I really want you guys to see here, this all started with Maxwell. He had his daughter Christine Maxwell, who ended up marrying Frank Molina, who was the rocket guy's son, Roger Molina. But because Molina was friends with Q Zhang, who started China's rocket program, he was also... So America pretty much gave China their rocket guy. Gave them that. And at the same time, not only was China... This whole point is pointing to communism in China, guys, is the main enemy of us right now. You have this guy that made the rockets for China, and at the same time, all this, after this has happened, you have Epstein, who is part of the Broad Institute, through his foundation, was funding MIT. And why did they go through China, guys? Why did they move this research to China and Bill Gates' money through China to make this CRISPR system, which can make superhuman beings? Because there is huge moral problems within the United States as far as experimenting on human beings, creating human beings, and fucking with their genetics. And obviously all these experiments don't go perfectly as planned, right? Some grotesque things can come from this research, so it's banned from the United States. But in places like China, it is not. So not only did the United States give China their rocket program, which started out in 1957 because we were afraid of communism, we have Epstein, through MIT, built a CRISPR system which can genetically modify any gene in the human genome to what they want, and it also ends up in China, right? And this has been going on for a while. This was an article back in February 22, 2019, China's CRISPR twins at Timeline of News, and they have created a set of twins. And this is just an article saying, did CRISPR help or harm the first ever gene-edited babies? And there is a lot of research saying, it's a long article. I'll put it in the link in descriptions, but pretty much some of the mistakes that they thought had made had actually enhanced their brains, guys, to superhuman. These babies, these twin babies, are gonna be super intelligent. Scary stuff. And not only that, China's CRISPR twins might be the first enhanced humans when it comes to brain power, which I just explained. And the Chinese scientists are creating CRISPR babies. This was back in November 18, but it's just another article that has been talking about it. So again, guys, I want to wrap this video up. What are the chances? And this is what I wrote it down. CRISPR was made possible by Epstein's funded Broad Institute, and the rocketry made possible by Maxwell's father-in-law, who brought the who brought the guy on board that took it all to China. What are the chances of all that, guys? It's absolutely insane. So when I saw all this, guys, I had to show you what are the chances that Maxwell would end up being linked to Joseph Molina and who ended up being the guy who brought the Chinese guy to the Soviets to make their rocket system, and also end up having one of his daughters be related to Epstein, who was funding the MIT, which was making genetically modified babies, and also and now that system remains in China, and they're currently experimenting that now. Crazy shit, guys. So thanks for bearing in with me, guys. I'm still fucked up, as you can tell. Still battling whatever allergies this is. I hope I made this as clear as I could. If you guys have any questions about this, just leave comments for me. Send me a message, email me, hit me up on Twitter. It's all out there. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be showing you these guys. These are the kind of digs I want to keep doing. I was going to do one on the DARPA tunnels, but I just didn't have time because it was so much content. Maybe one day we can get back into that. But these are the types of stories I want to get into, guys, as far as just working on news stories. So that's still going to be there. I'm going to keep you guys updated on all that stuff. So if you guys enjoyed the content, please subscribe, hit that like button. It takes 1 second just to hit the like button. Share it with your friends and family. Help them to wake up. Watch my other videos, and we're going to go from here. It's Monday. A-Chan is going to be back up any day now, guys. And when Q makes that first drop, it's going to probably break the internet. So strap in for a crazy week. The fall is almost here. I can feel it outside. This summer was nuts. Summer was absolutely crazy, full of content. So until then, guys, hang out with me and just wait until the next video with more great content. And until then, stay woke.